What's up everybody, Justin here to talk about working in Japan. Largely, a lot of native English speakers such as myself find their way to Japan teaching English. As stated in numerous other videos on YouTube and other podcasts, there are two types of English speaking teaching jobs. One is working as an assistant language teacher, or ALT for short, and you're teaching from kindergarten up until the high school level. And another form of English teaching is eikaiwa, or private English conversation schools, where you can teach just about any age group. And once you spend enough time here, gain some experience and some skills, other opportunities to work in the English teaching field, such as at the private school level, teaching international preschools or kindergartens, or the university level, can open up to you if you're interested. In my case, I worked as an ALT for about less than 7 years, from the kindergarten level to the high school level, and 6 years teaching at the private junior high and high school level, and 5 years of teaching eikaiwa, mostly to senior citizens. In the ALT field, I largely worked at the junior high level in Ibaraki, with the occasional visit to elementary and kindergartens. Then 2 years later, I worked at the high school level in Kagawa. Then, once again, I did the junior high and elementary level in Hiroshima, high school in Niigata, junior high school in Saitama, and a bit of elementary in Kanagawa. I also worked at a private high school for girls in Tochigi for 2 years, and while I was teaching eikaiwa for senior citizens in Tokyo and Kanagawa, on weekdays, I would teach Saturday lessons at a private high school in Sagamihara on Saturdays, which I'll get back to later. Then when the pandemic hit, I lost both of those jobs, but managed to find another job at a private girls' school in the middle of Tokyo. Now that I've introduced my teaching background to you all, allow me to give you the basics. And I also worked at 2 schools within biking distance and another school by train. As to why I was there briefly, by summer the company I worked for lost the contract to Jet, and my company found me another position in a city bordering Tokyo in Saitama. I really loved my schools and the people I was working with in Niigata, so it was really hard for me to leave. So from August 2011 to March 2013, I was working at just one junior high school. But still, man, it was really overwhelming. Since I was teaching in smaller cities and at smaller schools where there were like 3 classes per grade and 20 to 25 students per class, I was now teaching at a school with 7 classes per grade and 35 to 40 students per class. And for those first few months, I really struggled. I think some unions in the US would not allow more than 30 students per class. That's what I think, but anyone in the teachers union, please confirm that for me. And just about a year before that, I was teaching at an elementary school in Hiroshima with 45 students, the entire school. And the first grade class consisted of only 6 girls. So my world just turned upside down, and leaving a town and schools I liked was still hard on me, but in time, I was able to adjust. A lot of the teachers there were around my age, so it was easy for us to get along, but the students were just a handful. With this school in Saitama, I was teaching English communication classes, and the city's Board of Education had this curriculum to follow. It was simple, but the class sizes just made it difficult to keep things under control. I was living close to Tokyo, and the salary just wasn't enough, so after a year and a half, I had to find something different. The city where I was working at the time was about to go direct hire, and I was going to get a pay raise, but I found another opportunity in Tochigi to work at a private school for girls, and they were going to pay me more, and living in Tochigi was going to be cheaper since it's a relatively rural place. The job I was given there was to prepare these girls to do a 1-year study abroad in Adelaide, Australia. They let me do whatever I wanted as long as I was able to get them ready. And with the regular course students, they just said, do whatever you want. So it was a time to do a lot of experimenting with everything I learned and discover new things. So this position wasn't an ALT position. I was doing solo teaching, and I had my own homeroom class, so I had to know Japanese, etc. And I had a one-time contract from April 2013 to March 2015, and that was it. Yeah, sounds weird, but the politics of all this is another topic for another time. Then after that, I was hoping to get another job teaching at a private high school in Yokohama, but before I could sign any paperwork, they canceled my hiring at the last minute. And another crappy news, I had already gotten myself an apartment and was ready to make the move. And reluctantly, I took another position in Yokohama with a former employer teaching elementary from April 2015 to July 2015. The job wasn't working out and I wasn't in the right mental state for obvious reasons, so I decided to quit that job and work somewhere else. And so from July 2015, I found a job teaching senior citizens in Tokyo and Kanagawa. It was a very good experience, which I had up until December 2020, and you can conclusively make the reasons why. And when I did that job on weekdays, I did Saturday work at a private high school in Sagamihara from 2016 to 2020 as well. Unfortunately, the pandemic is why I lost those jobs, but thankfully, I managed to find another job at a private girls' school in Tokyo, in an area that bordered the wards of Chiyoda, Bunkyo, and Shinjuku. And I did that job from January 2021 to March 2023. I'll get into the details of these jobs later since they could be their own future episodes, but I will say a few things to wrap it all up. First, depending on where you work, the pay can range from 215,000 yen to 300,000 yen. On average, I say it's around 235,000 yen or 1,535 US dollars at the present exchange rate. If you're going to work as an ALT at the dispatch level or an eikaiwa, don't expect much in raises or advancements, but you can find higher paying ALT work through direct hire or through private schools. The last school I taught at paid 310,000 yen a month plus transportation fees. I heard eikaiwa hours can be all over and you'll largely be working on weekends since that's the most time most ordinary Japanese folks can take lessons. For most ALT work, you'll be working Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 4:30 or so, and you may have heard in the past that Japanese students go to school on Saturdays. And that's yes and no true. At the public school level, they did away with Saturday lessons from 2002. But even then, they did classes up until 12 or 12:30 or so. However, some private schools still do them. The school I worked at in Sagamihara had Saturday lessons twice a month, and the last school I taught at had classes every Saturday. But thankfully, my schedule was Tuesday through Saturday, and from Tuesdays through Fridays, I worked from 8:30 to 4:30, but on Saturdays, I worked up until 1:30. Even if I did Monday through Friday, I'd be getting the same pay for 3 hours of extra work a week, so, taking the Tuesday to Saturday schedule was for the best. Plus, having Mondays off is more convenient than you can think since those are the best times to go to the bank, the city office, and maybe immigration because those services are largely open from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. on weekdays. But yeah, for my school in Tochigi, it was just Monday through Friday. Anyway, there's a lot more that I can talk about, but those can be episodes on their own, especially how every experience is different, which can be a lot of themes. Until then, thank you for listening, and see you next time. Arigatou gozaimasu. At the junior high level, I was largely a human tape recorder. I would just simply read a passage from the book, or read off a word from a flashcard, and the students would repeat after me. It was boring, but I never really had to do any form of planning or preparations. The junior high didn't give me a computer, and the school didn't have Wi-Fi or any spare LAN cables, so I didn't bother bringing my own laptop. At the elementary level, from most of what I remembered from that time, it was like about once every month or so, and we largely played fruits baskets or sing head, shoulders, knees, and toes. Yay! Then when I was working in Kagawa from September 2009 to March 2010, I was teaching at 3 high schools. On Mondays, I teach at one high school. Then Tuesdays and Fridays, I'd be teaching at another. And on Wednesdays and Thursdays, I'd be teaching at another. I say this is kind of a more balanced schedule since I was largely teaching freshman students as opposed to teaching all three grade levels. Speaking of which, I know that the school system in some countries may differ. I know in some parts of the U.S., elementary is from kindergarten to 6th grade, junior high or middle school or whatever you call it is 7th and 8th grade, and senior high school is 9th to 12th grade. But in Japan, elementary is the same as the US mostly, but junior high is 7th to 9th, and senior high is 10th to 12th. I know that some countries in the US may differ, but this is how it is based on my own personal experiences. Compared to the junior high level, you have a more active role in teaching in high school. You get to control the lessons. You plan it all out. And honestly, I really liked experimenting with a lot of things. One challenge that I had with free talk was having boys and girls talking to each other. And when I encountered that challenge, I remembered my time in Ibaraki at a lesson I went to observe. The lesson created a system where if a boy talks to a boy or if a girl talks to another girl, then they get 1 point. But if a boy and a girl talk to each other, they would get 3 points. And whoever gets the most points would get like a sticker or something. I implemented that system and I managed to make it work. Then, when I was in Hiroshima from May 2010 to March 2011, I was at one junior high on Mondays, Thursdays, and Fridays, and I was at one satellite elementary on Tuesdays and another elementary on Wednesdays. And when I was teaching at the junior high school, I was just mostly playing human tape recorder. But since I was more serious about improving myself and not just standing around and doing nothing, I decided to take notes on whatever the teachers were doing, whatever they were writing on the board, and I figured it showed that I'm serious and that I'm focused, and I was working with some very good teachers and I studied everything they did. And it really worked for me in the long run. And it made me a much better teacher, or that's what I would like to believe. Then for a brief while from April 2011 to July 2011, I worked the high school level again in Niigata. I was largely doing the same stuff I was doing in Kagawa, but better. One of the high schools I was teaching at, which I think was on a Friday, had a boxing team. And I helped out with that team after school and on Saturdays as well. And if they had matches on weekends or national holidays, I would go and support that team. And that school really appreciated me for that. If you're interested in working at a Japanese school and want a first-hand idea of what the highly praised education system is like, then ALT work is the best way to go. One of the best ways of getting in is through the JET program, which is sponsored by the government. The application process tends to start from around October or November, and they only take applicants around that time. Then a few months later after the deadline, you get a letter saying whether or not you've got an interview, which can be around, give or take, between late February and early March. Then a month after your interview, you get your results. In my case, I applied for the JET program twice, once in 2004 and once in 2009. In both instances, I only made it as far as an alternate and was never officially accepted. So I went a different route. Since I was dead set on going to Japan, I decided to apply through a Dispatch ALT company, which is easier to get into, but more of a hassle. But if in the event you are offered a position by a dispatch company, you have to pay your own way to Japan, unlike the JET program, which pays for your flight to Japan and back to your own home country. And this is also the same with working for eikaiwa companies, so if JET doesn't work out for you, then you better have some spare money ready to pay for your own way to Japan if you're that interested in coming here, as I was. In addition, if you're coming to Japan through means that are not JET, you better have maybe the equivalent to, let's say, 2,000 US dollars ready to pay for your own apartment as well. You'll have to pay the startup fees like key money, etc. So when coming over, maybe not just $2,000, maybe $3,500 to $5,000 ready. It kind of depends on who hires you and all that stuff. I have heard mixed stories from people on Jet who either paid for their own apartments, and I have met some people who didn't have to pay for their own apartments. This is what the English teaching community in Japan calls ESID, short for Every Situation is Different, which is something that can be its own entire episode based on my own personal experiences. As to how you can find these jobs, JET has its own official website, and for those of you in university, your university should also have info in regards to getting in. Maybe it's different these days. Maybe not for old people like me. But for non-JET jobs, you can find some jobs on, let's say, gaijinpot.com, jobsinjapan.com, or ohiosensei.com, which is more of a bi-monthly newsletter. And I don't know how things are done today, but from what I understand, some people can get their Zairyu card or residence card the moment they get to Japan through immigration. And when I came to Japan the first time in 2001 as a high school student, and as a teacher again back in 2005 and 2009, the process of getting a visa and a residence card, or what used to be known as gaijin cards, was a lot different. I know I should have researched this beforehand, but I feel it's a lot better if I tell it based on my own experiences, I guess. But once you get offered a job from your own country, that's when the process of getting your visa starts. Back then, the company would send you a Certificate of Eligibility, or COE for short, as part of your application. A lot of people back in the day misassumed or didn't do the research that certificate wasn't your visa itself. You would send that certificate along with your application, passport, and other paperwork to a Japanese embassy or a consulate office in your home country for them to give you a visa, which would be like a sticker they would put on your passport or something like that. Those were the old school days, but I don't know about now. But then when you get to Japan these days, back then, and once you settle in wherever you're living, you go to your local city hall and apply for a gaijin card. This was largely the system until around 2012 or so, where the visa process got a whole lot easier. City halls no longer give them out, and you can just go to immigration and they will provide them to you. But I can only say this is based on my experiences for renewals, but not for entering the country. But compared to my day, it seems the process is a lot easier. However, if you do move from one city to another while your Zairyu card is still active, you still have to go to a local city hall for them to change the address on it. And if you're living here long term, your My Number card, which is the equivalent to, let's say, maybe a social security card in the US, is also tied to the expiration date of your Zairyu card, which can be a bit of an inconvenience. And if you're working as an ALT, your visa will say that you're you will get an instructor's visa, but if you're working at Eikaiwa, you'll get a specialist in humanities visa. And for those of you who are from the UK or Commonwealth countries, I believe just a working holiday visa should be enough for you, but this might be outdated information. However, to get your visa, at least for the Americans, you minimally must have a bachelor's degree, and it can be just about anything. This is just largely for visa purposes, of course. But when it comes to working as an instructor, your visa will only restrict you to that. So if working as an ALT for such and such dispatch company isn't enough for you, you can't exactly work at, let's say, the local 7-Eleven or McDonald's. However, most ALT companies won't care if you do private work, as in, working with private students at a cafe or a diner, or maybe through Zoom these days. The reason I bring this up is because a fellow American friend of mine who was working as an ALT at the time was also fighting professionally as a kickboxer. And the Japanese tax office or whoever reported to immigration, and immigration warned him that he was in violation of his visa. He was able to play the I didn't know card without any legal representation because more or less he was telling the truth. But a year or so later, he got married and he got a spouse visa and was able to resume his fighting career without any more incident. And when you get here, you may need to get your own hanko or personalized stamp. When I was here from 2005 to 2007, I got by without needing one. I was able to open a bank account with, I think it was Joso Bank. I don't really 100% remember. And I was also able to get a cell phone with just my signature alone. And however, when I came back in 2009, the dispatch company I was working for provided me with my own one, and I still use it to this very day. Going a bit of a tangent, I have a friend named Dan, and at the 100 yen store, he got a hanko with a kanji for bullet, which can also be read as Dan, and he's able to legally use it. And I have another friend whose last name is Young, and he found a hanko at the 100 yen store with the kanji for waka, meaning young, and it's also legally binding. But yeah, you can go to a specialized store that can make a hanko with your name on it, and I believe that there are some machines at Don Quixote stores, which I like to call the Japanese Walmarts, that can make one for you. Okay, I went on one heck of a tangent, but I felt this was very necessary info to include as it relates to settling into Japan. So, going back to teaching in Japan, my first job, as I said before, was working as an ALT in Ibaraki Prefecture from 2005 to 2007. More specifically, I was teaching in a small city of Tsuchiura, which was about less than 2 hours away from Tokyo by train. Though Tokyo may have some of the most convenient transportation infrastructures in the world, the same can't be said about most of Ibaraki. Ibaraki is largely a car-driven part of Japan, so trains and buses are not that common, and the trains mostly take you out of the city as opposed to one part of the city to another. And in other bad news, I didn't have an international driver's license at the time, so my only option was to either walk, which maybe would have taken me less than 2 hours, or get a bike, which took me between 45 minutes to an hour. So that's what I settled with. And some cities may have an ALT rotation system. In Tsuchiura, I was largely based in one junior high for the first term and would occasionally teach the satellite elementary and kindergartens, and then teach at another junior high school and its satellite schools the second term, and then go back to my first school during the third term. I know this can be mendokusai or a pain in the neck, but this allows students to be exposed to all kinds of foreigners and for ALTs to meet all kinds of people. I know for some people they would rather stay in one school, and that's understandable, and there are some cities that do exactly that. However, though I have never personally experienced it myself, but I have heard that in some cities, schools would rotate their ALTs on a monthly basis, and some people just didn't like it for the most obvious of reasons.